Hello everyone, welcome to Out of Spec Guide. I'm Max. Today you join me for a little quick rant basically about why I think Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and the like, basically technologies that mirror your smartphone screen to your car, are not the right solution for electric vehicles in particular. So really quick off the bat, let's explain what is Apple CarPlay. So if you're not familiar, it's basically a technology where you plug in your phone or you link it wirelessly to your car, and an interface of your phone is mirrored onto the car. So it looks a little bit different than what you're used to on your phone, but it tries to, in a very distraction-free way, present you maps, music, calendar items, basic things like that, as you can see on the website here that Apple has. And usually this has been kind of something that people like myself, right? I'm a tech savvy user. I love it when cars offer CarPlay. In general, I really like it. However, this video, I want to talk about why I don't think it's always the right option for electric vehicles in particular. And yes, I know those of you who use Android, there's this thing called Android Auto. It's the same thing as CarPlay basically, but on Android, which is where you plug your phone in and it can be wired or wireless depending on the car, and it puts up your music and your maps on the screen. So I've always loved using CarPlay on my car just because it's handy, right? Like you can just see all this stuff easily. And it works well on these smaller screens. However, there's two trends that I think work against it. Namely the fact that, one, electric vehicles actually, a lot of them tend to have bigger screens than this because they're sort of following Tesla's model of just having, a big screen. And two, an electric vehicle has very specific needs that CarPlay often doesn't have info about, and that it can't always solve on its own. What do I mean by that? Well, with an electric vehicle, you can watch other videos on this channel if any of what I'm about to say will confuse you, but you need to consider things like the state of charge of the battery. How much range do you have? Which chargers can you route to? And what will the speed of those chargers be? These are all things that are very, at the moment, primitive in Apple CarPlay to non-existent. So charging speed, not exposed in Apple CarPlay. I think similar situation for Google Maps with Android Auto. Now this is sort of changing slowly. There is the Ford, I believe, sync system that's used in, let's see if I can find the right tab. The Ford sync system used in the Lightning and the Mach-E actually does have some integration of your vehicle's percentage state of charge in CarPlay, which is cool. However, it's not perfect, honestly, and it still doesn't know the speed of the chargers, let alone the real-time availability. If you followed the out-of-spec channels or just EVs in general, you'll know that a lot of charging stations, Electrify America stalls, EVgo, what have you, they can have mixed reliability at times, and that's why a lot of EV drivers like to use apps like a Better Route Planner, which factor this in, or services like PlugShare, or even Rate Your Charge, where people provide check-ins and stuff about the status of a charger. These are all kind of EV-specific services. Now, I will say a Better Route Planner does have an app for Apple CarPlay. So if your car has CarPlay, not to worry, there is an app for a Better Route Planner. I'd recommend using that in an electric vehicle because you can put in your specific vehicle and it'll have much more advanced routing. Now, Apple Maps has a similar feature again, where you can put in your vehicle and it's supposed to know approximately how much range your vehicle has and what kind of chargers it's compatible with, but it's honestly not as sophisticated as a Better Route Planner, which does work on both CarPlay and Android Auto. So I will mention that, but into now, what's the solution, right? So, okay, Max, you don't like CarPlay. Why is that? Well, I think that if you're making these modern large electric vehicles with a large screen, everyone should honestly take the Tesla approach. And up until recently, I didn't actually buy into this. I hadn't spent a lot of time with Teslas, and as an Apple fan, someone who loves my iPhone, I didn't understand why Tesla doesn't have CarPlay. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love if Tesla added CarPlay in the software update. However, it's not the end of the world, because I realized that after spending some time driving a Model 3 for a few weeks, Tesla's navigation is actually really good. Better than Apple Maps. Not in the sense of like, oh, it has better traffic info or whatever, but I mean electric vehicle specific things. Because with a Tesla, if I navigate to somewhere using the Tesla navigation, it's going to precondition my battery. That means if it's very cold weather, it's going to get my battery to a nice warm temperature, so when I arrive at the charger, I get a good charging speed. It knows all these things about the car that it can control. CarPlay's nowhere there yet. However, I will say, Apple says there's a next generation of CarPlay coming, and they haven't made too many EV-specific promises, but they say it's going to be much more ambitious. Instead of just being the small center screen or, the one screen in your car, it's going to occupy several screens, like including your odometer and all that. We don't know much about this. There's going to be a software update to enable it on phones. However, we have no idea which cars are going to support this. And I think it's kind of a moot talking point because my suspicion is most cars currently on the road with their existing hardware are not going to support CarPlay 2 or whatever this next iteration is. So I think it's besides the point. I think everything you can buy right now in the market, like a Ford, F-150 Lightning, a Mach-E, Hyundai Ioniq 5, whatever that supports CarPlay as is, will not support CarPlay 2. Now, Android Auto, no news of this or anything similar. Google does have a product called Android Automotive, and that's sort of confusing. I can talk about that later in another video, but it's unrelated to Android Auto. But just so you know, I don't think the situation, basically, in short, is going to get better for either Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with EVs. Because, again, these apps like a Better Route Planner, yeah, they might exist on CarPlay, but they're not integrated the way that software can be when it's native on the car. Because when it's built into the car, it has all this info. It knows your car's state of charge. It knows exactly the chargers to route to. And in the case of Tesla, they know which superchargers are online. And theoretically, I think Ford and other manufacturers should be able to know the status of Electrify America much better with their access to the directory of chargers than Apple with Apple Maps. This is more speculative on my part, but I think it's kind of on the vehicle manufacturer's onus to support this. Another example, by the way, what I just talked about with preconditioning, you can see that with an update, the Kia EV6 and the Hyundai Ioniq 5 will offer, if I can find it here, preconditioning. So that's where when you navigate, again, using the car's built-in navigation, it's going to heat up your battery. This is a simple thing, and this is why I would recommend, if you have a car like this with the latest software, just use the built-in navigation. I recognize that you might be comfortable using Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze on CarPlay or Android Auto, but I would highly recommend in an electric car specifically using these alternatives, basically the native software. Another manufacturer that kind of takes Tesla's approach is Rivian. Now, Rivian's approach is, I think, decent, but it's not quite as refined. They haven't had as much time to work on it as Tesla. And it shows. I think their software is a little buggier. However, I do like its approach, and I don't mind too much that the Rivian's, trucks and SUVs don't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, because I think their built-in software is good. I'll make another note too. A lot of cars with wireless CarPlay kind of bug me, because wireless CarPlay or wireless Android Auto, right, needs to mirror your phone screen or send data wirelessly, and you might need to be charging your phone, maybe in a wireless charger if you're, avoiding having to plug in a cable. At that point, everything's very inefficient. You're creating a lot of extra heat. You're going to make your phone hot. I've noticed CarPlay can lag because the phone is so reheated it slows down. It's just not a good experience. And every implementation is different, but also audio. If you like to, I don't know, if you notice ever that when you plug in, the audio quality is better than when you have used Bluetooth. Well, that's a problem. Whereas if you use the built-in, let's say, music app on your Rivian or your Tesla or whichever vehicle, you're going to get much better quality because it's going directly to the car. I think overall, everything's just more efficient. Now, I recognize that depending on whether you use Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal, they might not have a native app for your vehicle. So this is kind of also a PSA to vehicle manufacturers to, I think, hopefully do what Tesla and Rivian have done. Just make really good native software. And I don't know, like CarPlay, having it as an option, I think is wonderful. And I'm glad that OEMs like Ford have such a good implementation of it. But I really, really want more. I want native software that compares to Tesla and Rivian, especially Tesla. Lucid now, I think, does a good middle ground on their vehicles where you can actually use, all the Lucid native software. They have their own navigation and everything, but they also offer CarPlay, which is great. But to Kia, to Hyundai, to Ford, to GM, to every automaker that currently has CarPlay, but has, in my opinion, lackluster native software for navigating, EV drivers to chargers and the like, please step up your game, because I think the time for CarPlay is over. This sounds like hyperbole. I like CarPlay still, but again, like it exists in this world when screens were small, when car software was really bad, and when everyone drove gas cars where it didn't really matter so much that you couldn't navigate along the way cleanly because, there's a lot of gas stations. It's easy to route to them. EVs are so complicated, right? Depending on your car, it can accept different charge speeds. It might have different compatibility between CHAdeMO and CCS and the Tesla connector. There's just all these variables that don't exist in gas cars, and that really needs to be considered with the native software, especially as we're asking more and more people to adopt these vehicles in the mainstream. So hopefully this wasn't too rambly, but this was just my kind of rant about why I think actually Apple CarPlay and Tesla and Rivian not having it isn't a huge deal, and why I think more vehicle manufacturers should be stepping up to replace and improve on what Apple CarPlay or Android Auto do, because they owe it to their customers, they owe it to their products. It's going to make them much better. In the meantime, as a band-aid, I will say services like I mentioned, a Better Route Planner, which has an app that works on CarPlay and Android Auto. These are a good kind of band-aid that you can use. So consider those. We're going to have a dedicated episode on a Better Route Planner. And in the future for Out of Spec Guide, and in general, I want to cover in-car software a lot more because it's so important for EVs. And every EV we talk about, I'm going to talk about navigation, how you route the chargers, not just for road trips, but just living with the car. It's really important. And it's something I think everyone who owns an EV needs to get used to. So let me know if from this long rant, if you have any questions, if what I've said makes no sense, please let me know. And let us know what other topics you'd like to see on Out of Spec Guide. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.